The first sound wasn't her scream, it was the splash. Cold water hit her face
Stay
as she
with me,
gasped,
Rose.
hands
I've got
trembling
you.
against the rough edge of the trough. Her torn dress clung
I've
to her
got you,
back,
Rose.
stained
You are
with
safe
dirt and
now.
blood.
Just keep
The
holding
sun
on.
above the Arizona plains
Rose,
burned
can you hear me?
mercilessly.
Please don't let
Flies
me go.
circled her wounds
I
like
am
they
right
already
here.
knew she was too weak to fight. Samuel Hayes stood behind her.
You should have kept
54,
running, Samuel.
skin weathered like cracked leather, his shirt soaked with sweat and regret. He wasn't her father. He wasn't her husband. But somehow she had ended up on his land, half dead, barely breathing, and no one in town wanted to know how or why. "Hold on," he said quietly. She tried. Her arms shook. Her lips were pale. The water in the trough rippled as her breath faltered. She had been found at sunrise near the canyon trail, beaten, barefoot, left for dead. Some said she was a runaway. Others whispered she was trouble. But when Samuel lifted her from the dust, something inside him broke. He had seen dying horses, starving families, and burned ranches. Yet never had he seen eyes that empty. He poured water over her shoulders, washing the blood away. The sound of it was soft, almost gentle, and for the first time that morning, she moved. Her fingers gripped the wood tighter, refusing to let go. It was as if her body was begging the earth not to forget her. The ranch was silent except for the wind. No one came to help. No one dared. Samuel looked at the horizon, at the long road that led back to the town of Dry Creek. He knew the men who did this. Men with silver spurs polished by fear, not dust. Men who smiled while women cried. He clenched his jaw, knowing that if she lived, they would come again. The girl tried to speak. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Why me?" He didn't answer. Not yet. He dipped a cloth into the water and pressed it gently against her cheek. She winced, but didn't pull away. Her eyes met his, full of fear and something else. A question. She was 24. Maybe a stranger with no name anyone cared to remember. But Samuel saw something different. Beneath the bruises, beneath the dirt, something that refused to die. The sun climbed higher, painting the plains gold. Her breathing steadied. The water turned red 3 times a day. That's how often he would clean her wounds before the fever broke, before she spoke her name again, before history itself would change because of what one rancher decided to do with a broken woman and a wooden trough. But right now, she was still trembling, still trapped between life and death, still wondering if kindness was just another lie. Samuel watched her carefully, his hand steady, his heart not. And as the wind howled across the open land, one question hung heavy in the air. Was he saving her life, or was he saving his own soul? The sun had already burned half the sky when Samuel carried her inside. The small cabin smelled of pine smoke and saddle leather. He laid her down on the cot near the window where the light fell soft and warm. She was barely awake, whispering words he couldn't understand. Maybe a prayer. Maybe a memory. He poured a tin cup of water, holding it close to her lips. She flinched at first, then drank like someone who hadn't tasted kindness in years. He watched the dirt wash from her face, one drop at a time. The bruises looked worse in daylight, but at least she was breathing. 3 times a day. That's what he promised himself. But on the 5th day, he forgot the evening bread. Rose sat by the window holding her stomach and staring across the endless hills when he came rushing back with a steaming bowl. His hand burned as the stew spilled over the rim. "I'm sorry," he said, breathless. She smiled for the first time. "It's all right," she whispered. "You remembered twice. That's already more than anyone ever did." Morning to clean her wounds, afternoon to feed her, night to keep the fever from carrying her away. He wasn't a doctor, just a rancher with rough hands and a quiet home. But something about this girl made him careful, made him gentle in a way he hadn't been since his daughter died years ago. Every time he touched her skin, he did it like the world might shatter if he pressed too hard. Outside, the wind rattled the stable doors. The horses shifted uneasy. Wolves had been circling the ridge again. Maybe they smelled blood. Maybe they smelled fear. Samuel didn't care. He only cared that she opened her eyes again. When she finally did, it startled him. They were gray-blue, soft but fierce, like rain clouds after a drought. "You're safe here," he said. Her voice cracked. "Safe never lasts." He didn't argue. He simply nodded and handed her another cup of water. Later that afternoon, he made her stew from beans and smoked beef. It wasn't much, but when she tasted it, her shoulders relaxed just a little. That was the first time she looked at him without fear, just tired eyes searching for a reason to trust. By the second week, she was strong enough to stand. The fever was gone, but the silence between them grew heavier. He sat at the table repairing a saddle strap, pretending not to notice when she watched him. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. He paused. "Because someone should have." She didn't answer after that. She only stared into the fire like the flames could explain what his words meant. When the wind moaned outside, he tossed another log into the stove. The room glowed warm and golden. She pulled the blanket tighter and closed her eyes for the first real sleep she'd had in days. Samuel leaned back, listening to her breathing steady like a slow song. He thought the night was finally over. But then she whispered one more thing, half dream, half warning. "They'll come for me when the moon turns full." Samuel froze. His hand stopped on the table. He looked at her pale face in the firelight, and for the first time, he wondered who she really was, and what kind of men were coming to drag her back. Weeks passed before she could walk without shaking. Her voice grew stronger, but the fear in her eyes stayed the same. By the third morning after the fever broke, she sat near the window before sunrise, wrapped in a blanket, staring across the empty land. Samuel poured coffee, dark and bitter, the way he always drank it. She took a sip, winced, then smiled softly. It was the first real smile he'd seen since she arrived. "You said they'd come for you," he reminded her. "Who are they?" She didn't look at him. "Men from Black Hollow, the kind that don't hear the word no." Samuel's jaw tightened. He had known men like that all his life, men who wore clean jackets to church and blood on their hands the rest of the week. By noon, he saddled his horse. "Stay inside. Lock the door." She grabbed his sleeve, weak but determined. "You'll get yourself killed." He looked straight into her eyes. "Maybe, but I won't let them take you." The ride to town was long, dusty, and silent. Every mile felt heavier. The streets of Black Hollow were waking up when he arrived. Men leaned across the saloon porch chewing tobacco, watching him like vultures on a fence. He found the sheriff beside the general store. "Morning, Samuel," the sheriff said carefully. "Heard you brought home a stranger." "She's not a stray animal," Samuel answered coldly. "She's hurt." The sheriff sighed. "You should have stayed out of it. Her name's Rose. Belonged to a ranch trader named Coulter Kane. He paid good money for her." Samuel's voice turned to ice. "You don't buy people." The town went silent. Every head turned. Even the wind seemed to stop breathing. Coulter Kane stepped from the saloon, wiping whiskey from his beard. "Well now," he laughed. "Looks like the old rancher finally found a backbone." Samuel didn't reach for his gun. He only stared him down. "You beat a woman and call it business. You come near my land again, and you'll learn what real pain feels like." Coulter laughed and spat near his boots, but the hand holding his glass trembled. That night, he sent 2 men from Red Mesa. He doubled the money and told them quietly, "Make it look accidental." Coulter smiled. That ugly kind of smile that makes your blood run cold. "You think you can stand between me and what's mine?" Samuel stepped closer. She's not yours. Not anymore. The crowd whispered. Nobody dared move. Even Coulter's grin faded. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the plains, though the sky was clear. When Samuel turned his horse to leave, the sheriff called after him. You just started something you can't finish. He didn't look back. Then I better make it worth finishing. That evening, as the sun bled red into the horizon, Rose waited on the porch, eyes full of worry. When she saw him riding home, her breathing finally eased. He looked tired, older somehow, but unbroken. They know now, he said simply. She whispered, What did you do? He glanced at her, a faint smile crossing his weathered face. I told the truth. And in a town built on silence, that was enough to make enemies. Now, if you've been listening this far, take a sip of your tea, lean back for a moment, and tell me where you're listening from. I'd truly love to know. And if you want to see how this story unfolds, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when the riders from Black Hollow come knocking after midnight. That night, the wind changed. It crept down from the mountains, dry and cruel, carrying the kind of silence that makes dogs crawl beneath porches. Samuel felt it first. The hairs on his neck rose. He stepped outside with his rifle, scanning the dark land. Rose was still awake by the fire, fingers gripping the edge of the blanket. They're coming, aren't they? She whispered. He nodded. Coulter doesn't forgive humiliation. He had moved her bed into the cellar earlier that day, just in case. Now he filled the lanterns with oil and checked every lock twice. The moon hung low and orange, turning the ranch silver and gold. Every sound felt sharp. The creak of wood, the restless horses, even his own breathing. Then out near the fence line, 3 shadows appeared from the darkness. Men on horseback. No lanterns. No voices. Only the slow pounding of hooves against dry earth. Samuel took a steady breath. He wasn't young anymore, but he'd survived enough fights to know one thing. Patience kills faster than anger. He waited until they reached the corral. Then the first lantern exploded into light. One rider cursed. He's awake. Samuel fired once, not to kill, just to warn. A second shot cracked from the stable. Cleaner, sharper. It came from old Ben Carter, the ranch hand who had worked beside Samuel for 20 years. Nobody saw him leave the barn after that night, and nobody ever asked why. Gunfire split the darkness like thunder. Horses reared. One rider fell screaming into the dirt. The others scrambled behind the fence. Inside the cabin, Rose crouched near the cellar stairs, eyes wide with terror. She could hear Samuel's voice outside, calm as stone. You picked the wrong ranch, boys. Bullets tore through the porch rail. Samuel moved like he'd lived this moment 100 times before. Every time they reloaded, he shifted position, pulling them closer toward the stable where he'd prepared his trap. Then a spark caught. A second later, flames exploded through the haystack, turning the night bright as noon. The riders panicked, blinded by fire. Samuel lunged forward, slamming one man into the dirt while the others fled into the darkness, dragging their wounded friend behind them. When it was over, the ranch fell silent again. Only the crackling flames remained, and Rose's footsteps on the porch. She ran to him, eyes filled with fear and relief. His shirt was torn, his knuckles bloody, but he was still standing. You could have died, she whispered. He wiped soot from his brow. Not tonight. She stared at the burning stable, then back at him. What will they do now? Samuel looked toward the hills where the riders vanished. His voice stayed calm. They'll come back. But next time, I won't be alone. She frowned. What do you mean? A tired half smile crossed his face as he looked at her like he'd already made a decision she didn't yet understand. And as the firelight danced across her eyes, Samuel said softly, "Tomorrow we ride to Red River Canyon. There's something I need you to see." Now that sounds simple enough, doesn't it? But what waited for them in that canyon would change both their lives forever. You won't believe what they found beyond those cliffs. The sun rose slowly over Red River Canyon, painting the stone cliffs with gold and fire. Samuel rode ahead. Rose followed behind him, wrapped in his old coat. The wind smelled of sagebrush, dust, and something unfamiliar. Hope, maybe. They stopped near a ridge where the canyon opened wide like a promise. Far below, the river shimmered silver through the red rock. Samuel climbed down first, then helped her gently to the ground. His hands were rough, steady, kind. "This place," he said quietly, "saved me once. Maybe it'll save you, too." For a long moment, she didn't speak. She only stared at the endless canyon, eyes shining softly. "Why here?" "Because out here," he answered, "no one owns another soul. The land doesn't care who you were, only who you choose to become." She stepped closer to the cliff's edge, sunlight catching in her hair. Every breath seemed to carry more of the past away. The bruises, the shame, the cruel names they'd called her, gone little by little, like dust carried off by the wind. That summer, they stayed in the canyon, 3 times a day, just like before. Morning, she helped him care for the horses. Noon, they shared simple meals beside the river. Evening, they talked beside the fire. Sometimes Rose asked about old Ben Carter, but Samuel would only stare toward the distant hills and say quietly, "He's watching over the ranch from somewhere higher now." Sometimes they didn't speak at all. They just listened to the world breathe. He never asked her to stay. She never asked him why he cared. Maybe some things don't need explaining. Maybe healing doesn't come through words, only through time. One night beneath the stars, she whispered softly, "I thought I was broken." Samuel poked the fire and smiled. "Maybe you were, but broken things still shine when you hold them up to the light." They both laughed, the kind of laugh that makes you believe life can begin again. When autumn came, they built a small cabin beside the river. Nothing fancy, just 4 walls and a roof that leaked when it rained. But it was theirs. No debts, no fear, just peace. Years later, people would say that little ranch became a refuge, a place where no woman was turned away, where no hungry soul was ever told to leave. Some said what Samuel and Rose built changed the whole valley forever. Maybe it did. Maybe kindness really can echo that far. So if this story touched your heart, take a moment to hit like, share this story with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more unforgettable Western tales. And remember, healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just whispers 3 times a day.